There's Always a Lyric is sponsored by Lotus 823. At Lotus 823, your goals are our goals. We help consumer tech, home, and lifestyle brands gain visibility, drive relevant traffic, and increase sales through customized public relations and marketing strategies. Want to learn more? Head over to lotus823.com or get in touch at biz@lotus823.com today.
Well, welcome to the latest episode of There's Always a Lyric, and today my guest is David Harry Stewart. I'm very excited to speak to David because we got to share a stage a number of years ago at TEDx Asbury Park, and from that moment and hearing him speak to the demographic that I'm very much a part of, the 50 plus crew, he intrigued me, and he definitely gave me a feeling of wanting to learn more about how I could stay vibrant and how my wife and I could stay vibrant, maintain a sense of fullness of life through the next part of our journey in life together. And with that, I wanted to give just a quick background on David. David is the founder and the face of AGEIST. He is a passionate champion of the modern 50-plus lifestyle and a leading authority on the mindset and aspirations that drive this influential demographic. As the go-to reference on people in our age group, he frequently shares his expertise and insights with major media publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the Times of London, CNN, South China Morning Post, Forbes, and Fortune. He also consults for a wide range of Fortune 500 brands and businesses. An entertaining and lively speaker, he delivered the keynote at the Global Wellness Summit in Singapore, Monocle Quality of Life, HIMMS, Las Vegas, and many other large-scale venues. Before he launched AGEIST, Stewart is an award-winning photographer whose work includes multiple magazine covers and global advertising campaigns. Welcome, David Harry Stewart. And wow, that was a lot.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here.
If you can tell us a little bit about AGEIST, share the story of AGEIST and its birth and the why of AGEIST.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I had this pretty rocking career as a photographer. So Paris, New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo, that was sort of my gig.
Yeah.
And I worked with a lot of high-level stuff, big productions. And when I was 56, I was hired by Vice Media, which I think is currently in the state of bankruptcy.
Yeah, which is hard to fathom for a $700 million behemoth, but okay.
Well, if you saw what I saw there, it would make total sense.
Oh, really?
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Lord.
Yeah, okay. It was just kabuki theater over there every day. Wow. But anyway, so they hired me to do this big out-of-home campaign, and it was just a big deal. It was like, I don't know, it was like 5 months and like 7 figures and bunch of cities, and there's a lot of big out-of-home things, so billboards. And so I won't mention what the product was, but the product had to be, the casting specs were 18 to 29. I think we did about 60 of these billboards, and 59 of the people that we shot didn't actually buy the product. Their parents had bought it. And I thought, that's weird. So like, and I went to the Vice people who the people who are running this particular campaign were really sharp. And I said, do you know about this?
Right.
People aren't even buying the product. I don't understand. And they said, oh yeah, we know about that. I said, well, did you tell the client that? And they're like, oh no, we wouldn't do that. And I said, well, what? I don't understand. Why did you just like suck up like 6 months of my life and spend a lot of money doing this thing? And they said, well, we sell to younger people because that's what we know how to do. I was like, okay.
That was the answer.
That was the answer. And then I was just flabbergasted by this.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, how much more of this goes on out there? Because what I was seeing was, I was 56 at the time. I'm getting older. My friends are getting older.
Yeah.
But we're only speaking to the same sort of, the age demographic stays the same.
Right.
Like even 29 is sort of like on the upper end.
Right.
And I thought, well, this is curious. So I did a lot of investigation, looking at consumer spending numbers versus ad spending numbers and, all this sort of stuff. And I went back to them and I said, well, hey guys, this youth marketing, this is very cute. Yeah, okay, that's fun. But there's no money there. The money is all over here and nobody's talking to them. And when they are talking to them, they don't do a very good job of it. And I said, why don't we do this? And they're like, well, we can't do that because you're asking us to time travel into the future. And the guy I was speaking to was, I don't know, early 30s, very sharp guy. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, that's a really fair answer. I appreciate that. Maybe you can't do it, but I can.
So this is the itch that needed scratching, right? This is
So then and I just started investigating more and more. And for about 6 months, because I was trying to answer the question in my mind, like, I know these big companies are not dumb. They're not run by dummies. The people who do their marketing are not like
absolutely
dumb. Not. What's going on? Why is there this constant fail of especially the imagery, the stories, all the messaging? Why is this going on? So we, found out a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of like, well, Bob's selling to younger people, so, we should sell to younger people. Or, art director tops out in 30, 32, creative director about 35. So these are the people they know. All of the stuff that was sort of targeted to people who were older was also this massive fail. And it took me a lot. I just did not understand this. So we eventually figured it out. What happens is I'm sure you're aware, and this is why AGEIST looks so great, why it looks different than everybody else.
Right.
Because what we do is aspirational, inspirational, and attainable, right? But nobody else does that. They seem to sort of like they don't think that's possible. Everything else out there is this, sort of like infantilized, medicalized, the two nice waspy people in their chinos walking down the beach with the dog.
Right.
Who is that? Like, I don't know.
Right.
So we do cool, like essentially. Agreed. And what we say is cool is ageless, and that works. Like, we're able to, for some, it's not that hard, but like other people can't seem to do this. So that's why these brands hire us. And what we do is we tell them, at AGEIST, every once in a while we'll do somebody in their late 40s, but generally 50 is about the cutoff. About 40% of my audience is under 50, and a quarter of them are under 30. So
that's an interesting data point.
What's up with that?
Right.
Because they want to be like us. So again, inspirational, aspirational, attainable. Like,
right.
Do that. That was sort of the genesis. And we knew in the beginning, this was sort of, Vice was around. There was, all this sort of digital media companies. There was the Skim, there was BuzzFeed, there was like all this stuff. And you'll notice like that didn't work out so well for anybody.
Right.
And we had looked at the financials of these companies, and from what we could tell, we were like, this just doesn't work. Like, you're spending 10, 20, $50 million on churn every month. Like, how's that ever going to work out? Right. So our initial model was B2B, and we produced a little, very, very primitive newsletter. We sent it to 50 of our friends. Our grand ambition was they would remain our friends after we sent them this thing, and they did. And now we have this pretty large global audience.
Yeah.
And we still work for brands, and we serve our reader base.
You had this, by any measure, incredible career as a photographer. What made you choose the business model for it in the way that you have? Because when I look at the magazine today, there's something there for everybody, for whatever you're interested in, basically, whether it's from the nutrition side, technology side, fashion, which is like, that's a whole nother conversation about how we're treated, meaning, the royal we of our age group. And you kind of debunked that.
Right.
With that whole fashion section where there's cool stuff to be had for people our age.
Well, I think what we try and serve is we're really clear on who we're talking to. And I think that this is, whenever a brand comes to me, I make them get, there's sort of a come to Jesus moment. It's like, who you're really talking to, because what happens is these brands, they look at the statistics and they're like, oh gosh, $1 trillion in consumer spending, the fastest growing market. And then they get all hot and bothered about, and they want, I want all that. And it's like, guys, you can't have all of that. Our data people tell us it's about 18% of the population, like, 50 to, I don't know, 65, 70, something like that. And it may be more than 70, but this sort of data sort of falls off at a certain point there.
Right.
And so what we do is every week we do a profile, which is an example of like, here's a person, here's what they look like, and this is how they live. And, these are the sort of the challenges they've had, and this is where they are now. Maybe you can learn from this. So that's sort of, and I think we all as human beings learn by story. And, especially in our age demographic, the most important thing about story is, what does it look like? Because that's the biggest difference between us and somebody who's 25. We think a little differently and stuff, but basically the big difference is we look different.
Right.
So what does it look like? So, I come out of a visual background. That's really important. But then there's the whole sort of 360 ecosystem around this. What are the things that impact it? Of course, anything to do with physicality is massive. So we talk a lot about that. There's also a lot of confusion with people who, like myself included, like, I'm 64. There is no way when I was like 25 thinking that this is what 64 was going to be.
Absolutely.
It's like our big mission is to expand people's imagination about what is going on and what could be going on. And it just puts some other things on the menu. Like, you don't have to take them, but just to let you know, they're there. If you want to do this, like, here you go.
So you've done a number of very interesting profiles on AGEIST. Is there one that stands out in your mind that, just because it was so interesting or fascinating to you, how this person got from point A to, not point B, but point Z in their life, right?
You're asking me to pick my favorite child.
Oh, yeah, that's impossible. Impossible.
Joan McDonald. Joan McDonald, who's now reasonably famous. We've got, I don't know, a few million people on Instagram. When we found her, it was like 30,000. Joan, who's now, we did Joan about 3 or 4 years ago, so it was pre-pandemic. And so Joan's story is, when she was like 69 or 70, I want to say, she was like over 200 pounds, had a bag of medications, was essentially a blob sitting in a chair, looking at chronic disease.
I remember reading this. This is amazing. Go ahead.
And her daughter was a trainer. And her daughter, and when I did a podcast, I had the two of them on. We profiled John, but on the podcast, there's like the two of them. And I asked them, like, how did this go?
Right.
And her daughter, Michelle, said, well, I just called up Joan and I said, listen, this can go two ways. The first way is you continue doing what you're doing and I'm out of your life. I'm not going to watch this happen because I know what's going to happen and it's not good. Way number two, you come down and see me and we take care of this problem. And so Joan was like, okay, I'll choose B. Okay. So Joan, the last time I spoke to Joan was about a year ago, and I think she's like 133 pounds.
Amazing.
Joan can do 10 dead hang pull-ups with a 25-pound weight. So I'm a strong guy, and that's still like, that's not nothing, right? Yeah, Joan is buff, and she had no background in physicality before, zero. So when people tell me, like, oh, geez, I'm 50, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I say, no, you just don't want to do it.
Right.
That's different than say, and I respect that. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But don't tell me you can't do it. Because I've seen, since we've done Joan, I don't know, there's like dozens and dozens of people who've done the same thing. Most of them women, which is the other thing, which makes me crazy. Yeah. Be like, oh, I've gone through menopause, I can't do this anymore. Okay.
Right.
If you want to believe this, right? that's a belief system, and you should have a look at that first.
Wow.
I like to point out people like that. They're people who've made really dramatic changes in their health. I mean, like, one of the things you got to understand is we do a lot of research on this, and your behavior is predicated upon how you see yourself in the future. You will behave in a way to cause you think you got a long, runway ahead of you. You're going to cause that to happen. You're going to invest in yourself. You're going to take care of yourself. It's a different mindset. If you think it's like game over in 3 years, it's a very different behavior pattern.
Sure.
And all this sits upon, guess what? Your body. So you feel one way about your body. And I don't mean like looking great. It's just like, how well is your body working? And that, conservatively, people say it's like 80% behavior. I think it's like 95% behavior.
Right.
It's really, and this is one of the things that we keep hammering home. People have agency. What they do matters. Like, you weren't, struck by obesity and, high blood pressure. This is not an act of God. This is an act of you. Which is wonderful, because you just decide not to,
you can undo.
You can undo that.
You can undo that.
You can change. If you want to. I mean, if you want to like do that, I have no problem with people living. It's their lives. They can do whatever they want to do. And like I said, our job is we just put options on the menu.
And it seems like when you start looking at it carefully, you can make minor changes that have major, major impact.
Yeah.
You're not asking somebody to become a world-class weightlifter. You're just asking them to get up and move.
If they want to. If
they're looking at the idea of what you said before, they want some longevity and quality of life in that longevity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not everybody wants that, and I'm okay with that. But if you do, I can show you how to do that. And it's so much of it is just being purposeful and understanding that behaviors have results. They have consequences and they have results, and
good and bad, depending on
bad. Yeah, you can't fully control the what happens. Mm-hmm. You can sort of direct that, but you can 100% control. Mm-hmm. Nobody's shoving a Twinkie in your mouth.
That's right.
The Twinkie gets in your mouth. You did that.
Mm-hmm.
So just my martial arts teacher, Sabunim at World Martial Arts in New York, was,
influential.
He told me I could do things I didn't think I could do. I also, my friend now Joniba, who's from West Africa, who ran Joniba Dance and Drum, and for 5 years I suffered through learning how to do. It was like the skinny white guy with these like hip black chicks from Fort Greene, and I learned how to do African dance, and sort of learning these things that seem incomprehensible, completely incomprehensible. And they're like, no, like you can do this. Here, let me just show you. I guess in a sort of a more of a businessy kind of way, Jonathan Chung, who's my friend, who was the head of global design at Levi's, very smart guy. He's running, trying to save the Gap. I don't know if that can be done, but if anybody can do it, he can do it. A lot of my
they were people in your life, not necessarily like a business mentor or whatever.
No,
they're almost like friends and coaches all at the same time in their own way. And to that, I want to ask you about yourself and all that. Yes, you've got a lot going on. How do you find balance? Where do you find that teeter-totter?
I think balance is enormously overrated. I think it's massively overrated. Like if you want to get shit done and you want to make an impact,
right?
That's not balanced. Like you gotta do it.
Right. And it requires a lot.
It requires a lot. And I think when I was a photographer, I had people I dated, and they're like, oh, why aren't you taking off, the weekend or something? Or why aren't you doing this? It's like, no, it's like, it's like a way of life. It was like all encompassing. And
it's not a job.
It's not a job. No.
Not a job.
And jobs are much easier.
For sure.
So with a job, you show up, you do a thing for a period of time. You know there's compensation coming. There's a regularity, a predictability to things. And I've never had a job. So I don't really function in that way. Like that's the other thing. If anybody's thinking about starting a business, like this is not for the faint of heart. It requires a certain sort of ability to accept delusion as reality. I mean, I sort of look at it as you're driving down the road at night and your headlights only see so far. So you can see to that point. After that point, I mean, who knows? One of the other things I've noticed with, working with a lot of these different companies and sort of like, so this idea of foundational values. And one of the things that I learned when I was a photographer is, as a photographer, you're nothing unless you have a sense of authorship. So if your stuff looks like everybody else's stuff, which I have to say, 99.9% of the photographers out there now are just afraid of offending someone and not having any sense of authorship and just being as bland as possible. That wasn't the way when I started in like the 80s. That just wouldn't work. You had to be like, what was your vision? What was your sense of authorship? So that sort of led me to this idea of foundational values. And whenever we work with someone, or even here at AGEIST, like this is not a democracy. I'm not doing focus groups. Like, okay, you don't like it, fine. I appreciate that. Thank you. I like it. And that's how I do it. And I think that the huge mistake that people make is they get outside of that. And they say, and I can't tell you how many of these things I've seen fail, where you get like a couple of very smart, can be men or women, and they say, oh, look at this opportunity over here. Oh, we're going to go do that. But it's outside of their experience and their values. And they're just sort of seeing this. They're looking at math and it doesn't work. And it's essential that whatever you're doing is aligned with this sense of foundational values. And you need to, the thing that differentiates you and whatever you're doing is your vision, your sense of authorship, and your values. I'm gonna tell you a stat you're gonna love. You know what my open rate is?
No idea.
68%.
That doesn't even sound real. That's how incredible that is. And
who's got an open rate like that?
No one. Absolutely zero.
No one. Exactly.
No one. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's why.
Right. It comes back to the purity of the why.
Yeah.
Which is your why. And that's the foundational piece that set the whole thing in motion to begin with. That's the driver.
That's the driver. That's the through line, right? That's the, I've heard it described as like if you took the American government, the Constitution is those foundational values. And then all those little laws and everything that's on the books and all this other stuff is sort of the organizational values. But you need to have that foundation that's locked in stone that will not move. And then you can apply that vision, that focus to other things, but you need to have that.
That is 100% true. And that's the only thing that eventually rings true to people.
Yeah.
Because people can sense that and feel that through the output, through the product that's delivered to them.
Yeah.
And conversely too, if to the other side, when you're just doing it out of opportunity and not really because you believe in it.
Right.
Because you're really not connected to it. That whole section right now to me is foundational to anybody that wants to start any kind. I don't care what the business is. I don't care if it's a service business or if it's a product business, what have you. Everything you just said is that's where the rubber meets the road, essentially.
And I think it's like, if you're going to get a job, it's got to be aligned. Like your values, whatever's going on in the job in the company, it has to be aligned. Otherwise, you're a miserable person.
100% agree. Then it's a job that's drudgery.
It's horrible. Why would you do? Your life is short. You really want to do that? Don't do that. You have options. Don't do that.
That's a great dovetail back to our conversation about AGEIST mission and about life and what we do with that life, with that runway that's in front of us, specifically for our age group. I'm going to go on a limb and just say I think you see a lot of optimism for that, for this part of our lives, continuing optimism.
Well, yeah, and I think, my original degree was mechanical engineering, so I'm
stop, wait,
yeah.
How many lives have you had?
A few. But because of that training, I have an ability to read sort of science at a low level. I'm not at the people
Right.
we talk to are like Nobel Prize level. That's not me. But
Right.
I can understand what they're talking about, and I can read their stuff. And I have things I don't understand, I show to my scientific board. And the reasons for optimism are we are going to be living much, much longer if you can keep yourself healthy and like not do something stupid and die.
Yeah.
You're gonna be around for a very, very long time, more so than I think anybody is imagining. And what this does is it increases the optionality we have. If you increase the amount of time that, if you make the runway longer, so if you're 60 and you've got, say, a 15-year runway, that's one thing. If you're 60 and you've got a 50 or a 60-year runway, it's a very different thing. We're going to be living a lot longer than we may have expected to. And a lot of the reasons that we're skeptical of this is because you and I were both promised flying cars.
Right.
We don't have flying cars. This is not flying car territory. So, I'm seeing what's happening with genetic reprogramming, with, there's like 4 or 5 other really super impactful things that are happening in terms of lifespan, health span. And I think things look very promising that way. And it's going to be quite disorienting. I think that we're going to see, we've got like a 2 or 3 generational workforce. We're probably going to go to 5. What happens to capital distribution? What happens to like retirement? What happens to like a whole healthcare? There's like a whole lot of things out there that didn't get addressed. Sort of a wonderful time to be our age.
I have one more question. You're a busy guy, but
absolutely.
The title is There's Always a Lyric, and that's the conceit here. My final question is, if there was a song title or a song lyric that best captures you or your life story, what would it be?
Okay, so I'm going to be politically really incorrect here. I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this. Kanye West, Stronger.
Wow, that's a good one, actually.
Dude is nuts, batshit crazy, but hey, he's good at what he does.
It's trust the art, not the artist.
Exactly, don't trust him.
Trust the art.
Get the meds, Kanye. Get the meds.
Right, seriously. That's what, that actually is perfect for you. That really that actually captures the mission.
Yeah.
It's you and it's the mission, because they're both the same thing.
Yeah.
That's what you just taught me. They're both the same thing. That's the foundation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
That's the foundation. You got to have that. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. Anyway, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for making the time to do this. And I can't wait to get my next newsletter. I just got the most recent one and I read through it. And what I wish for you, I just wish much continued health, vitality, strength, stay stronger. And we'll hopefully meet again and talk again. Thanks again for joining us.